Jedi business, go back to your drinks.
Welcome. All are welcome. Young fans, old fans, thanks for joining another episode of Jedi Business. Once again, I'm joining Darth Zartan. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How about yourself, Manny?
Good. How about you? How's the new year treating you?
So far, so good. Just trying to get organized. Our house project got finished about a week and a half ago, so I'm feeling good about that and moving into the new year and just hoping for good health, if nothing else.
Anyways, let's get started. We got Skeleton Crew episode 6, and I think this episode, more than anything, encapsulates my thought that maybe they should make these episodes longer because this episode just, and I'm not bagging on it that it was bad, but it just seemed a little too short. Not really much happened in a certain sense, and I think it would have bookended really well with last episode. Last episode and this episode could have made a good
Yeah,
1-2, a
yeah.
1 hour episode.
I thought the exact same thing. They could have put both episodes together, which would have felt a little bit more fulfilling. But I think at the same time, this one could have been expanded not by like another 20 minutes, but maybe just like another 3 to 5 minutes. And I guess what I mean as we go forward, I mean, there was a sequence of events on the pirate ship. I think they could have at least kind of moved that plot forward just a little bit, maybe a 30-second, 1 minute addition there. And then with the kids, maybe another minute or two. And I think you call it good, but it did feel pretty short.
And really, there are just like two scenes, really, the pirate ship and then the kids on the run. So there wasn't much happening in that sense, but within that framework, we're seeing that we had a Neil episode a couple episodes ago when he was with when they were on that at Athen or whatever. That was kind of the Neil episode. This episode looks like was the KB episode. Learning a little bit more about her, and I felt it was really done well. I thought all that was good, but I agree with you. I feel it could have been. I thought Silva was nailing it with his talk, and I thought that could have. But let's just start it off. Let's see.
All right.
So episode begins, and it kind of dovetails in from the last episode, which I felt was kind of the quote unquote Gooniest episode. They're falling through them tunnels, which straight out of the Goonies episode.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the end of the Goonies reference from there. But they're falling down those tunnels. They land. KB's obviously hurt, and then it switches back. Silvo's caught. 33 shot. X-wing show. Everything's splitting apart and getting crazy. And then we switch over. KB and Fern are fighting, and I think it's kind of a growth episode for Fern in a sense that she's obviously been shown to be this kind of hard-headed, stubborn, she's in charge type of thing, but she doesn't realize that sometimes other people need a different way.
Oh, you know what? It's funny, kind of in an ironic way, right? Watching that sequence. I mean, again, great job by the kids as far as acting, but I think to me it felt a little bit like either a personal experience, either something I've personally dealt with or something I've witnessed, where someone's like basically saying, "Hey, why don't you toughen up? Why don't you do this?" And it's like, hey, people have some limitations sometimes, whether because of the health reasons or for other reasons. And she was trying to explain it in her way, and obviously, as we see, she was starting to shut down. And I mean, Wim with his way, he was able to focus long enough to help her out, which obviously saved her. But
yeah, one thing she does mention, she says my ogs are corroded. We're going to assume she means augmentations, which we've been kind of right that she is some kind of not a machine, but she definitely has cybernetic augmentations.
Right.
She's definitely much more than just a human.
And again, the closest character I'd compare it to would be Lobot. I think we ever quite saw what his he didn't have a visor, but he had a similar sort of setup in the back, it looked like, of his head. So I would be curious. I don't know if we're going to find out in the next 2 episodes, but I'd be curious to see what actually was the cause of her injury and how extensive was it. It looked, as we see in this episode, it kind of goes in about at least
significant,
a quarter to a third maybe of the back of her head. So that's
when I saw that, I was like, whoa, that it took me even, it seemed more than what I thought. I thought it was some implants on the side.
Yeah.
But yeah, she basically opens the back of her head.
Yeah, we're not talking Geordie LaForge visor, we're talking about a whole setup that's kind of like a cyberpunk, sort of thing where you're replacing body parts almost.
Yep. And of course, she starts to shut down, and she has Wim make one of those. It's basically just like I don't know, what would you call it? Not a transformer, but basically something that's helps conduct the electricity or something like that. Kind of
Yeah,
a
and you know what?
breaker or something.
Somewhere along the way, I saw a comment between that last episode and today, knowing that we were going to discuss it, and there was a kid on one of these sites. He was a mechanical engineer, and he said, "Wow, it was pretty cool to see him do a sand casting, which has been around for probably hundreds, if not, of years or longer. Just the technology, it's basically doing what they did, which was creating a mold and then pouring some metal in there and then basically manufacturing a new or a copy of whatever you're trying to create. So yeah, kind of crazy, right? I mean, I'm thinking, was that even like sterile?
Yeah,
you know
yeah. Well, here's the thing too. It's like, okay, so I don't know if I told you this, but I had been watching this show by myself, but I got my niece and her boyfriend into it.
right,
So
right.
so now I'd say we binged it the maybe like 3 4 weeks ago to catch them up. But the last two episodes, it's all like I'll get texts. It's like, don't watch it. We're coming. We're gonna watch it all together. So we've been watching it the last 2 weeks in a row. Okay, latest. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
But while we were watching that scene, one of them was like, "Well, that doesn't seem right that you could do it out of sand and all that." And I'm like, "But actually, like you said, that is how they used to do it. And if you ever watch these YouTube videos when they're doing castings, that's basically what they're doing. They're making a mold out of sand and pouring the whatever it is, aluminum or whatever, into the mold, and that's basically how they do it. It's in sand, so that came across as true. And the only thing that I shouted out when they did it, it's like, man, if this is that important, make another one real quick. Have a
you got
spare. How do you not have a
you
spare?
yeah, you got plenty of parts. You might as well make an extra one, right?
Yeah, which brings me back to them crabs. And when they were like fall, did you kind of think they'd end up being, I don't know, quote unquote bad, or do you think they were trying to lead them away, or what were your thoughts with those crabs?
Well, initially I thought they were just an introduction of a cute character, like, oh, because basically they're walking around. You see one has a protocol droid's leg on it,
Yeah, so
basically
were they
body.
mechanical or were they real?
No, 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 no. I think if I'm pretty confident that the creators got the idea from the real world. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but because of so much junk and plastic that's out there in the world floating around, have you ever seen these pictures? Go look online. Hermit crabs, right? We all grew up with some, either had them or saw them, and in the old days they used to have shells. Well, they obviously are born that way. They have them. But a lot of times, if what they do, they don't grow a new shell. They have to go find another one that's
Yeah,
bigger. So as they grow, my point is, they'll collect anything. It could be a Pepsi bottle. It could be, you name it, a piece of junk. So it was perfect that this planet, or that this part of the planet where it was basically a junk pit, these creatures were going and just figuring out basically whatever was there and using that as their shell. What I didn't figure out until I saw the mother or the daddy, whatever that was, is that they were basically leading the kids to the parent to become food for everybody, I guess.
yeah, yeah. You know what? Actually, the first time I watched it, I thought they were mechanical. I basically thought they're out there breaking down, the garbage, and then I thought actually the big mama crab was mechanical too, which is why the first watch I'm like, well, why would she want to eat them? She can't eat biological. It wasn't
Right,
until
right. I
I
see.
rewatched it this morning when I started to notice that the mama crab was actually alive. It was a real crab. So that's what made me think, is like, and then that makes sense with what you just said about there, because I noticed the protocol droid foot too, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, are they real? So yeah, that makes sense that they were real and they were leading. Yeah, this is dinner.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. But I assumed that they were real, but I didn't quite figure out that they were going to be dinner until they got to the big
Yeah,
one. You
first
know.
time I did, I thought they're okay. That's their way of breaking, which was the machine we see later on that really was breaking down the guards. But I thought that's basically what they were, but obviously they weren't. Anyway, so while they're doing that, we have KB and Neil climbing up the ladder, and we get a little fern growth there, like what I was talking earlier, when while KB was saying, you know how Fern is, she doesn't think that I can't do anything, or I'm afraid to tell her I can't do anything because she wouldn't be friends.
Right.
Neil's all like Neil's all like Fern, not everyone can do what you can, and she kind of comes to a little revelation, and that's when she grabs a rope. But I think that shows a little bit of growth on her part because she's obviously the leader type. She's obviously their leader, and as a leader, that's something you have to realize. Of course, we go to the pirates. We switch back to the pirates, and they do that one lady. Obviously, she felt. I don't know if you noticed her, the one that said, equal time. You could tell she felt bothered by losing Silvo. So he obviously still has his followers in the crowd. But I thought he gave a great speech. I thought that was freaking fantastic. He really captured when he starts out with he's silent for a little bit and he's like, "I'm hungry." You know what I'm saying? And then he just goes into that
Right.
whole.
Right. Well,
I
because
thought that was pretty
you,
good.
well, because he was with them, because he is a pirate, he can relate directly to him. So each of them were thinking, "Yeah, I've been in his. I feel that way every day," or that's something that they could all relate to.
Yeah, yeah. So he nailed it pretty good. Again, they still start to cast him out, and I agree with you. I felt they just kind of shortchanged that whole situation a little bit. I thought they could have added a little bit more. There could have been a little bit more. Um, but yeah, I guess it is what it is on that one.
Well, I think the only thing they probably could have done was saying in another 30 seconds to a minute was, okay, we're going to go ahead and give you this chance. Let's do it. And then they show them punching the coordinates and then they're gone or something like that. It doesn't have to be, but I imagine in the next episode, we're just going to see them showing up on the planet or something.
Yeah, or he could have had some kind of. I'm not going to tell you the coordinates
True, true.
unless I'm back part of the crew or something. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
don't know.
To me, it
And
felt slightly unresolved, right?
yeah, it's a little unresolved, but and then like I said, just and really, there's basically two scenes in the whole movie. I mean, realistically, there's three, I guess you could say. There's the pirates, KB and Fern, and then Neil. I mean, Wim and KB and Neil and K, and Fern. So there's like not a lot of things happening, but there's a lot of things happening within those short sort situations or
Right.
whatever. So we get some growth with Fern. With KB, we learned a little bit more about her, how she's reluctant to argue with Fern, and which we had noticed in previous episodes where Fern, when they took votes, Fern didn't even ask KB. She goes, "Well, me and KB say this," and we realize that KB's feeling, well, how Fern is. She has no patience, and then which goes back to the name of the episode. Go back to zero friends again. And Wim's like, "That's dumb. Just be friends with Neil and me." And she kind of smiles and she says, "Thanks, Jedi," which kind of, Wim's pretty happy when he hears that. So
Yeah.
you got a lot of character growth on that.
I agree. I agree that both of those right sequences with both groups of kids enabled the kids to kind of open their eyes and grow a little bit. If we can for just a sec though, I think this was early on as I'm looking at this, probably I think at about maybe 4 minutes 15 mark till about it lasted for about 30 seconds, maybe not even that. But the fact that the kids witnessed the X-wing shooting on the ships, the
Uh-huh.
pirates.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know if you wanted to comment on that,
Yeah,
but
go ahead. Go for it.
I thought it was interesting. It told us a little bit more about the time frame, right? Because the kids comment like someone had told them, "Oh, X-wings." Like basically, they didn't know what an
Well,
X-wing.
yeah, so obviously if they've been put away, X-Wings at that time in the, at in Star Wars, that was I'm talking the original trilogy. They were considered the latest ship, right? At
Well,
that time.
I
But
would say
they would never have heard of it because they've been closed off since the old Republic.
well, but again. Yeah, well, I'm trying to figure out though. We never did get quite clarification on where in the timeline of the Old Republic, and this didn't exactly solve that problem, but it still kind of put us a little bit closer, potentially. I'm thinking at the latest Clone Wars, right? And so
Well, they would never. The only reason they heard of an X-wing is from the Dark Crystal chick,
oh,
Agra.
right,
She's the
Patty.
one. She's yeah, whatever. The owl. She's the
Oh,
one that
the owl. You're right. You're right. Yeah,
because
yeah,
they
yeah.
go, oh, that's the ship that what she goes. That's what I forgot her name now, but she called them X-wings, and so that's how they had heard the term X-wing. Because when Luke saw an X-wing, that was the latest and greatest ship. He goes, wow, an X-wing. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that wasn't new until episode 4. So there's no way the kids had heard of one before. That's why they heard it
Oh,
from.
no doubt. I'm trying to figure out, again, how far or how long have they been sort of blocked off? Granted, Old Republic, but Old Republic period lasted
Yeah, yeah,
what,
yeah, of course.
quite a
I,
few.
I I think it has to be before Clone Wars
Probably.
because they're not talk. They're pretty much at peace. Whereas the clone, if they had any, well, then again, you never know. But
Well, but
I'm thinking it goes back to the High Republic. I'm thinking that at least until what they talk about in the High Republic, the Acolyte era. That's the era I'm thinking they've been shown.
well, if that was the intention of the Acolyte show, is to kind of provide a little bit of context to what came after, then I guess that's a possibility. But in light of how poorly received the show was, I wonder if they'll fast forward a little bit farther in time to, the Old Republic. I think would have been. Again, I haven't read all the books or all the comics and material in the last almost 10 years now, but um, I
And
would.
what sucks is I don't know what's canon anymore. You know how much I read all the Tales of Jedi. I have the timeline in my head. Nomi Sunrider, blah blah blah,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's none of that exists anymore. So I don't even really know what's considered canon anymore. Because I mean,
Well,
I know, but I don't in my head. I can't. In the
well,
old days, I could tell you this happened, this happened, this
yeah.
happened. I
No,
can't do
no,
that anymore.
I'm with you. Obviously, things changed certainly in 2012. With Lucasfilm being acquired by Disney, but even before that, there were some things that I didn't keep up on every single thing. But to my bigger point, which is, the High Republic was a specific period of time, and so was the Old Republic, which I think occurred shortly after that. So that's why I say it would have occurred. Plus, the kids have already commented once or twice in the series about the war, like what's the war, what war was that? So this would have been, even like you suggested, even before the Clone Wars, so sometime um when things were riding high, I guess, for the
Yeah,
Republic.
it would have to be before the Clone War.
And then one other thing attached to that scene or that sequence is, I think the kids, they were still trying to figure things out as far as who was maybe good or bad. Well, in their mind, if they see the X-wings chasing after him, just like they did in the episode with Kim, the owl-like creature, um, then I would assume at that point it was pretty clear, who was good and who was bad in their mind, looking at seeing who
Yeah,
was
because I think one of them shouts out the X-wings are the bad guys because that's what Jod said, and
right,
then Wim's
right,
like, no, they're the good guys. It's Wim who says that because obviously Jod was the bad guy
right.
fighting off the pirates. So yeah,
Well, it confirms what they just experienced, right? Which was this guy who took him in a sense, and all of a sudden flipped to basically just do what he wanted to do to acquire power, or in this case, wealth. But it pretty much re-emphasizes what I think the kids already just found out, which was, hey, those are all bad guys. Anyone that he associates with, etc. And so that might be a plot point that comes up in the last episode or sometime in the next two episodes, is maybe the kids see a X-wing pilot or somehow are able to send a message or whatever, right? At least they know kind of who the good versus the bad guys are at this point.
since you're talking about, there is one thing that I remember that kind of, I don't want to say it bugged me, but when Silvo first comes up from that trap door onto the landing area, and he's covered in all that gold and gold chains and
Yeah.
emeralds, and then the pirates don't even consider that. That did not ring true with me because
No, no, I thought the same thing. I
as a
thought
pirate,
that.
they would have gone and I don't care because pirates are like, and especially this goes to what I've been watching it with the Sopranos. Okay, they may have loyalty to Tony, but the main guy. But if something's going off, they're going to take that money that in that situation.
Yeah,
They're looking out for a number one. And those pirates would when he said when they saw the treasure and he said there was more, they would have went back down there and looted that.
I agree. I agree. But
So
and
yeah,
you can't say it was because they knew the Republic was coming. It was because that kind of took them by surprise when the X-wings did show up. So I agree that was a little bit out of character. I guess they, in a sense, cheated a little bit by kind of speeding the plot along a little bit. But I think, yeah, you're right. That would have just fallen right in character.
yeah. And then also the first time I watched it, after I was watching, I was like, what happened to 33? Did he end up getting stuck on the ship? It wasn't until the second watch that I noticed, oh yeah, the pirates do carry him off, so he is with Silvo. I thought they just left him there.
Right, right.
Okay, so yeah, they save him from the a little bit of silliness with the women. I'm just saying, I felt it was a little sad. It wasn't that bad, but seeing the little kids jumping off onto the ships, and then when they rescue KB and Fern and jump onto that little ship, it just seemed a little silly, what I'm saying? Because it was going fast. It's like
Well,
you know what I'm
you
saying?
you would think that one or more of the kids would have been killed, right?
Or falling off, or they, but
Something.
whatever. Um, and then that's like I said, the second time I noticed that the crab was alive. They have their emotional reunion. They never should have let you go, and this and that. So it's good to see that this happens in comics too, and other literature, other movies where the team splits apart for a while. They get in an argument, they split apart, then they come back stronger than ever. I've seen that
Yeah,
in X-Men before,
sure.
and so that was pretty good. And then we get that final sequence with the garbage, which what I thought the original crab was doing originally, which is
Ah,
basically eating the garbage or just and I thought that machine was pretty cool. It reminded me something out of they had these things called World Devastators back
yeah,
in Dark Empire 2, where basically it was just a machine that would go across, eat
yes.
stuff, and turn it into material. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Well,
And
uh,
yeah, go ahead.
that's a good point. I forgot about that, but that's a good comparison. But I went a little bit further back. The first thing that popped in my head, again, for those of us that grew up during the dark times of, and I'm not talking about the Dark Times comic, but I'm saying the dark times where after the droids and Ewok stuff back in the mid '80s, there was nothing until basically the Phantom Menace. I mean, or you could say, at least in the literature, there was the Zahn trilogy. So you're looking at about a 5 to 6 year gap where there was nothing, right? So my point is, the thing that came to my mind was from the old Droids cartoon series. If you followed that at all, the Great Heap, which was if you look it up, you'll see it's basically a large um, trash compactor type machine that had some type of sentience that would eat trash, droids, whatever. Anyhow, that's kind of what popped into my head because that's what this thing is doing, right? So I don't know if that was a callback to that, or maybe a callback to, like you said, the World Devastators, or a little bit of both, or because they've pulled from different elements from
Yeah,
Star
yeah.
Wars history. But I don't know. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, but when you say that name, the Great Heap, it sounds
Well,
familiar.
it was supposed to air with the others, but if you remember at that time, shows were pretty. I mean, it was pretty fickle. If the audience didn't support it, they weren't shy to cancel these things. So at that point, droids had been sort of off the air for several months at least, and then I think sometime down the road, if 6-12 months down the road, this was turned out to be like a half hour long special. I think it was an hour long, probably 2 episodes broken into,
Just like episodes they had left over that they ever aired or something.
yeah, that they were going to air, and so they just put it into a movie and it just aired. I remember seeing it after the show had pretty much gone off the air, and I was a little surprised, but I think it was just their way of filling some time, and they already had the material in the can. So anyhow, if you get a chance, look it up, The Great
Yeah,
Heap.
I'll
And
check that out.
anyhow, but yeah, kind of cool, right? It kind of adds a little bit of a time crunch element. The kids were trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? What do we got to get out of here? And the ship wasn't starting and all this business, right? So it kind of puts them under the pressure.
You ever seen that movie? Well, it's a movie, but it's made up of a bunch of shorts. And if you never checked it out, I would highly recommend it. It's called The Animatrix. It's kind of set in the world of the Matrix, but it's in cartoon anime
Okay.
form, and it's really excellent. They basically it's a bunch of shorts, and it tells the story of how the world collapsed, how the robots rebelled, why they rebelled. It tells a story how they form their own nation and go to the UN, and tells how the humans blotted out the sky. I don't know if you're how familiar you are with the Matrix.
Yeah, I mean it's starting to come back to me.
Yeah, but if you ever get a chance, even if you're not too much into the Matrix, check out that animation. Anyways, there's a couple scenes in there which remind me of the junk heap thing too, where a lot of robots when basically when they rebelled against them and they put all the robots were sentenced to death, and it just reminded me the imagery of that, the piles, and when Neil sees that one robot and he goes, "Well, you think 33 is okay?" It just reminded me. So I just wanted to bring that up because if you never
Right.
checked it out, you should check it out.
Right.
So they finally get into the Onyx Cinder, I believe it's called, and they're trapped. And once again, KB plugs into her head. So we see that she does have some kind of a power source there.
Yeah.
And they push the button they were told not to push. And they separate the saucer section, as I like to say.
That's a good analogy.
So yeah, what did you think about that whole
Uh,
incident?
I thought it was kind of silly, but I mean, I mean, in other words, that it had this other shell. Um, I don't know. I wasn't completely bought in on that idea, but it works in terms of speeding the plot along and getting the kids out of there, and then setting up a little different dynamic with a much sleeker sort of design of a ship. And I don't know if it has any other enhancements, but um, yeah, okay. So here, it just kind of furthered the plot along for me ultimately, but I guess it also lost the front two engines. It looks like because I think it had six,
Uh-huh.
but I think by the end it was left with four, right, or something like that.
Two or four. And not only that, but them getting the ship back and us hearing earlier that KB had the coordinates in her head leads,
Right.
leads me to believe what episode 6? So there's 2 episodes left, right?
Yeah.
That leads me to believe that they are going to get back to their house after all, which like I said at the beginning of the episode, I was feeling there's no way they're getting back to
Right.
I think after this episode, with the pirates now, with Silvo having the coordinates and them having a ship with the coordinates, I think they're all going to meet up on Adam, and something's going to happen. And I think we're going to learn more, which is weird because the plot point with the parents that that's been in the background, but it's really if they do end up back on Adam, that plot point really went nowhere, which seems weird because they made such a big deal about last week with the whole underhandedness, trying to get the code to send out a help signal or something. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
And
here's what I think could happen, though, right? It's just I agree it would be if it turns out to be nothing, but I think especially since we've already seen um, one of the characters in the Mandalorian, which was one of the pirate characters. He's a Nikto, or no, yeah, Nikto species, I guess. But I'm beginning to wonder if yes, okay, now I'm on the same page with you. They all make it back either in the next episode or the final episode. Maybe the emergency signal goes out. The question is going to be who responds. Maybe that's the bigger mystery now,
yeah, yeah.
because I do sense that yes, they will get there now. But I obviously don't think that the pirates are just going to win and the show's over.
Luke,
I think
Luke, Luke in the
someone's going
Republic.
to go up. So either the kids bring help with them. That's why I think maybe this whole X-wing connection maybe starts fitting together, which is they find allies and bring them with them, or they meet them there, or a combination. They do that, and the New Republic responds based on a response. It's like the old. I wouldn't be surprised if they use the old language from Jedi, right, when they're in the Tidarium shuttle, and they use the old password, as the Imperials say. It's an old password, but it checks out. So
Yeah.
I just wonder if maybe, right, the New Republic gets this message and they say, well, gee, it's an old message, but it checks out. And all of a sudden they show up, and then they meet them with whoever the kids bring along, and then they face the pirates, and there you go.
Okay, so that being said, I agree with that. That's probably what's going to happen. Although I hadn't thought about that, but that makes sense. That they're probably going to get their next episode, and it's going to be resolved by the final, maybe. But let's take a sidestep here, because one of the unfortunate things that gets said constantly online whenever they're discussing something new, like even the Mandalorian season 2 with Luke and Grogu and different things, there's a phrase which I don't know you've ever heard that people bring up whenever something's going good, and that is all roads lead to the sequels. Meaning that however great that scene with Luke and Grogu, whatever that seeing Luke back and in the season finale of episode 2, The Mandalorian, we know how it turns out. So it doesn't matter how great it was. It's like, unless they retcon it and say the sequels didn't happen, which is not going to happen, but I'm just saying, unless that happens, all roads lead to the sequel. So somebody was saying they brought back the whole Rise of Skywalker incident. How in the world was Palpatine able to build these tons and it's just one of JJ's? He doesn't think things through. How
Right.
was he able to build all these ships on Exegol? Because when they show up, there's this massive fleet. How was he able to build them? How was he able to pay for it? How was he able to get the materials? There's so many questions. Somebody brought up, well, what if somehow Adam falls into the hands of the remaining uh, empire, and that's the money they use to build a fleet on Exegol eventually in Rise of Skywalker. You know what I'm saying? I know that's convoluted, but it answers one of the questions, like, well, how did he pay for all this stuff? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I'm not falling for that. Only because okay, let's go with the assumption it is a mint, right? And they're producing these Old Republic credits. Well, I guess who would be conducting business in those credits, or would they just melt them down in the gold? I guess maybe that is a possibility if they're just all being melted down into a raw material. But I don't necessarily see. I don't see the Imperials dealing with Old Republic credits. You see what I mean? It's like, why would you be? It's like
Well, if it was the material itself that was which it
well,
must be, because they flip out over seeing an Old Republic credit,
well,
and
and
they're
why
still
is
taking it.
why is it that it is? Is it because it's old? No, obviously they're flipping out because there's value attached to that. So it's probably
Exactly.
it's the metal that was used, and
Yeah,
it's
and not only that, but go back to something else that I was thinking about this. Something else Fern said when she was talking to Wim when she first met him in front of the principal's office,
yeah,
and she starts to talk about, and I haven't seen it since then, but I remember her talking something about a story how, and she was saying, I know what happened to the last person that missed their finals or was late or something. They took them down to the mine and they were never seen again. And Wim goes, oh, that's not true. But my point is, that goes to, if there's stories about there, if they're even halfway true, that there are mines, on that planet, and that's why everything's so controlled, is because they do send people off to work in those mines, and they're still working. You know what I'm saying? It's just there's a side thought, because, like you said, it has to be in the metal. There has to be mines there, and they have to have people to work them. So I just kind of thought about that. How when Fern brought that up, it's like they put him away, and he was sent to the mines, and he was never seen again, or something like that.
well, I don't see any of that. Certainly the material and that whole explanation, if in fact that holds some water, I don't see any of that really being discussed with respect to the sequel trilogy and how they funded a fleet, thousands of light years away. That would have to be touched on in probably another book series or another, whether it's in a movie or whether it's in another TV show. I just think that's too much ground to try and cover when we're trying to get this storyline wrapped up. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah. No,
But
trust me, I'm not agreeing with that because I don't even like thinking about the sequels at all. I'm just saying that's something I heard that.
yeah, no, I know that issue has come up. I guess like you, I see it more as a historical anomaly that the sequels got made, that they were received by the public, and obviously there's split decisions on it. But the farther we get away from those, even I almost feel like when they play those on TV, I'm certainly not in a rush to watch them. But I also get the sense that not a lot of other people are too. But I'm just probably speaking for myself and maybe a handful of people. I don't know, but I also thought I heard, if we're on this, since we're on this topic, I thought I had heard somewhere. I didn't go anywhere other than just kind of an earworm that got in my head. I thought I had heard that something had come up recently in the Star Wars universe that somehow is sort of trying to find, how would I put it? Basically doing away with the sequel trilogy, and maybe that's part of the reason why the Ray movie got canceled. So I don't know what that is. I didn't dig into it. It's just something I had heard by, you go through different things on the internet, or maybe you listen to a podcast or some show or something. And
Unfortunately, I think that is wishful thinking.
yeah, no, I agree.
Although I don't know how much you follow Star Trek, but recently there was something that happened that
Yes,
made
with
Star Trek
Discovery, right?
Discovery it's not canon anymore. They basically invalidated the whole
Well, I
series.
heard that. I had heard that too. I don't think I got the two stories mixed up, but I did hear that too. I don't know if you want to get into.
I don't know. I haven't dealt. Like I said, I watched that the first season or so, and I was watching Strange New Worlds, but I kind of lost track, so I couldn't. I don't want to speak to that to what happened, but
Yeah,
given that the fact that they're dealing with alternate timelines, anyways, that's the Kelvin quote unquote Kelvin timeline and blah blah blah. It would be much easier to do that, but I honestly I can't speak to why.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas in
Well,
Star Wars, it's considered. I think the only thing they can do is go on and not. I think it's a mistake to tell a Ray story. I think it's a mistake to tell anything. I agree with some people that say if you want to say, well, we need to get past the Return of the Jedi era, what they should do is just go into the future and start telling a new story. You know what I'm
well,
saying?
ironically, isn't that what they've done? I mean, they're only about 5 years plus beyond Jedi, but that's what they've done with all these shows in the last few years. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's
But
it's
the thing is, they're still dealing in the timeline where Luke, Leia, and Han and everybody's still there. And I know they tried to do with Acolyte to create a new
yeah.
era, quote unquote, where they could tell stories. But one way or the other, the Filoni verse is coming to an end by his own admission. So they're gonna have to come up with stories in a different timeline, anyways.
Yeah, so it will be curious to see. Let's just say 8 to 10 years from now, right? What does the universe look like? I don't know. Um, it is interesting. I don't foresee. I agree with you. Whatever I heard was probably wishful thinking because,
I mean, I wish they'd do that.
well,
I would not have a problem with that at all if they wanted to come. Okay, this is the new episode 7.
right, right. Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, I don't have a problem with it either, especially in the way that we've seen Marvel do with their multiverse. In other words, there's infinite possibilities depending on how you want to handle that storyline. So, I guess interestingly enough, it does make you think that, yeah, okay, so after this Filoni era is over, let's just say in the next 3 years or whatever, what comes next? And I guess there's a part of me that thinks that, yeah, maybe they find a way to sidestep the sequel trilogy. But I do also see that, so just the pure logistics of it, Disney made a ton of money with each of those movies.
Yeah, but they
And
did go down over time.
well, but I mean, you're talking over $1 billion. I mean,
Yeah, no, that's what
so
I'm saying. That's why I say they wouldn't do it. I realize that they made money, but obviously, I mean, even people that love this movie, The Last Jedi, have to admit, or they will admit, that movie is, to use Star Wars terms, that is a vergence in the Star Wars universe. That's when it cracked the universe because so many people did not like that. You know
Well,
what I'm
but this is what I'm saying though, is Disney has a financial investment in what they've created. I mean, I haven't been there. I don't know if you've been there yet, but the whole Star Wars land down in Disney World, Disneyland, it's all based on the sequel trilogy.
Well, that fans that go down there to this day say they can't believe why they would do that. There's so many rumors going around that say Disney does that because if they use, and I can't find anywhere that will confirm this or deny this. So I'm not saying this is real. I'm just saying this is what I've read. That there's rumors that the reason why Disney does that is because if they use characters that were created during the pre-Disney era, Lucasfilm era, he gets a cut of the merchandise and stuff like that.
Huh.
And so that's why you see such a push not to use those characters because they want they have to pay him more money. Anytime they use like say a Luke or a Leia or Boba Fett, that's why they push so much uh, the sequel characters. Now that's what I heard. Whether that's true or not, I mean, from just a pure observation point, it sure seems like that's what it is because there's got to be a reason why there's money in the legacy characters. I mean, whenever you see new
Well,
stuff online or for sale, T-shirts or you don't see the sequel characters. You see prequel, but you mostly see the original trilogy.
Well, so it makes me wonder. I heard that same theory several years ago. I think this is when the sequel movies were still being produced, being put out. This idea that somehow Lucas has put there was some agreement, written or otherwise, that like because people have said, well, hey, now that Disney owns it, maybe you should go back. You have all that the rights, especially now that they have the Fox rights. I think this is when it had come out, is when they were just wrapping that up, the acquisition of the Fox movie empire. In addition to wrapping up their sequel trilogy, someone said, well, now would be a time if you wanted to put all 6 movies out again on whatever 4K or whatever media you wanted to do. But in addition to that, putting the original versions, in addition to the special edition versions, out on some sort of media. Right, but we still haven't seen, other than what was released on a laser disc or.
Well, there's a reason why that is, and the reason is George Lucas doesn't want it. He does not consider those Star Wars anymore. He considers the special editions and subsequent revisions that's Star Wars. Now there was a big call to put out the originals on DVD DVD, which they did use that laser disc uh, cut, and the reason why they had to do that is because the negatives for the original film. I've read this. The negatives for the original film, when they upgraded it to the special edition, don't exist anymore. So
Hmm.
they can't. They'd have to go to a pristine print, but they could not go back to the negative because they cut those negatives. Those negatives for the original film do not exist. And supposedly Lucas himself, I've read this from multiple places that in the contract is that they do not ever release those versions again.
Well, that was the question I had, right? And so this has been kind of a 10-minute conversation, but I think to your point, that's what I wanted to know is it, because if it is an agreement.
Go back and look. They say those negatives don't exist. I've heard a couple of producers say they can't release it. They couldn't do it even if they wanted to.
Yeah, I don't know if I completely believe that, because I think what it would be is it would be superseded regardless of whatever is out there, because there are copies out there. I mean, that's just a fact. I mean, whether someone takes it, and again,
Well, what I
I'm
mean is they couldn't do it off the negative. They couldn't be pristine. I mean, because you're right. I have
yeah,
the original. I have the original trilogy on
yeah,
VHS.
yeah. Yeah, well, and that's just it. So, right, I mean, technologically, that might be a different question, but the question at hand is was that part of the agreement? And what
Yes.
you're saying is yes, it was. So, if that's the case, then it's a done deal. So we won't ever see those, at least not while Disney owns it and Lucas is alive, right? So who knows what happens afterwards with the estate, or who
What do
knows
you
how
what do
that's.
you what do you? And we could do a different show on this, but what do you feel about the special editions? Do you really want to see the? Because I'll tell you what, the only thing that really bothers me, because I was excited for the special edition, the only thing that really bothers me, the couple things with the Han shot first thing, I think that's just absolutely stupid. The way
Yes.
Han kind of jerk, I think that's ridiculous. one thing other people bring up is the Jabba scene, but actually the current version, not the first version, but the current version, I think looks pretty good. So I like what they did in Cloud City. I don't like the no as he screams when he's going down.
Yes.
Yeah, things that I don't like Obi-Wan's Cryat Dragon, the new one. I think
Right.
this sounds like he's yelling. The original one I thought was the best. So there are little things that bother me, but I don't know. I kind of I don't mind them.
I mean, is it something I can't stand to watch? No. I mean, I when they're on, I watch them. Right? If they're on like broadcast or cable TV or something like that, I'll watch them. But um, those are things that certainly I would change. But again, it's not my it's not my call, right? So, I guess what I would say is that the original editions would be more for historical reasons, right? Not for probably. I mean, I clearly don't see those coming back to be viewed time and again like we see with the special editions, which have now been on, gosh, what, almost 25 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I get it. And certainly, hey, Lucas was still alive at the time. He made those final cuts, those changes, and he is the creator, so he can do what he wants with it, certainly at the time. And then when he handed it off or signed it off sold it to Disney, if that was part of the agreement, then it is what it is. It's too bad, though, just for historical purposes, we can't ever see a good quality version of the original version. And I agree, there are a few things that stick out that I wish could be changed. Like, I guess that was either his decision or he felt like he had the bow to some pressure to change the Han versus Greedo scene where he shoots him first. I don't really care for I thought the special effects were terrible on Jabba then and even today when I see it in my mind, and just in my mind, because it doesn't replicate. To me, that whole sequence was unnecessary, but I think even just the special effects, it just goes to show you how sort of it was still in its infancy as opposed to
Have
a
you
practice.
have so you're talking about even the current version? You've seen the 4K version that they're streaming?
I have not seen I have not seen the 4K version in 4K,
Okay.
so I have to
Yeah,
admit
yeah,
that.
I agree. I agree with a lot of what you say. Trust me, if they never put it in there, I wouldn't mind. If they put it as a deleted scene, but definitely, if you get a chance to look at the difference between the original special edition and the current version, I think it's night and day. And even if you still don't like it, I like it a lot better.
There are three things I would probably have changed. I would probably change the Han versus Greedo scene, change any of the musical sequences that were changed back to the original, both
So,
in both in
oh,
Jabba's
so Wub
palace
Wub,
and the Ewok
yeah, yeah.
ending scene, and the no, right when he's throwing the Emperor down the shaft. That those three things I would probably change. Everything else I could live with.
I would
So
change those three things, and the only thing I would change would be Obi-Wan's dragon yell. 'Cause
yeah, I mean, I can live with it, but
that
I
was
agree with you. I agree with you. The original trilogy version was better, but I can live with it. So
Anyway,
yeah,
like you said, we kind of went off on a tangent here, but
yeah.
let me bring it back just real quick before we end this. Unfortunately, I want to talk about the ratings for Skeleton Crew. I don't know if you've
No,
kept
I
up.
haven't seen. What are you hearing, or what are you
So
reading?
it's bad, but it's good in a certain way. So it's been number one on Disney streaming. However, it has not performed well in terms of viewership overall. It's failed to crack the top 10 of any streaming charts on Variety, even though it's got positive critical reception. It's not in any of the streaming charts, and it hasn't done well. However, one thing that is good is that each episode, which didn't happen with Acolyte, each episode the ratings go up. Going from the first episode, the trend is up. So that says that more people are getting into it, more people are watching, it's getting good word of mouth, and the viewership trend is definitely going up. So it's not good that the ratings are bad, but it is good that people are hearing about it and coming to it. Her name was Lola. She was a showgirl. So they're number one on Disney, but overall, in terms of all platforms, Max and blah, 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 they're not even cracking the top 10. So their ratings are not good. However, the good thing about it, their ratings are going up for each episode.
Oh,
Whereas,
really?
like the Acolyte, every episode got less and less, and the season ending was just abysmal.
So
And
word of mouth obviously is what's helped
yeah,
this out.
yeah. So that's it. Word of mouth. People convincing other people, and
Podcasts like ours.
yes. So yeah, definitely get the word out because, like I said, I got my niece into it. So yeah, just looking at the charts, it's definitely grown. The viewership trend is definitely up. So that's all good. I mean, it's unfortunately when you got a show that's going to cost a lot of money, it's not good that they're not doing well ratings wise. But I'm
Well,
just happy that the ratings are going up.
I well here, let me just give you an example though, and maybe it's very, I think, recent. I mean, just last month we were hearing how much money that Andor season one cost, right? And people were their minds were blown out, I guess. But the reality is, it was a quality show. The same sort of scenario where I think the ratings overall weren't great, but certainly the critics and I think for those fans that were watching enjoyed it, and obviously it did well enough that they decided to do a season two. So I don't, especially if they're doing well on Disney Plus, I have a feeling that Disney will. Because they're not, it's not the traditional heads up, 8 p.m. cable slot, NBC versus CBS. It ain't like that anymore. So I don't think Disney's worried about that as much. Would they like those numbers to be up? Sure. But if they're number one on the subscription service, I think that's going to bode well for them either seeing a second season or certainly emphasizing some of those characters in a movie. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, I think what they basically got going on with Star Wars is kind of what we're seeing a little bit with Marvel, in the sense that there was a time, and I remember it because my coworkers were like this, my cousins. Oh, the next Marvel's out. Let's go. We got to go to the show. Oh, next Marvel's out. We got to, you seen Captain and Winter Soldier, Captain America Winter Soldier. You know what I'm saying? There was
Yeah.
a time where it was like you were sitting there waiting. It got to the point, unfortunately, when you got Eternals and this and that, and I'm not blaming any particular one show or movie, but it got to a point where now I'm like, hey, did you see the new Black Panther? It's like, well, no, I never caught it. I never saw this. Obvious exceptions with them
Well, the
agreeing,
the
but
the phrase we used to hear growing up is it's must see TV. In this case,
yeah,
it was not
and,
must see.
and Star Wars was like that too. We really noticed it after the Last Jedi when Solo bombed, and that was a bomb in all metrics and lost a lot of money.
Hmm.
And we're seeing it, in TV when shows they start out well but they disappoint. I think that's the problem. Is like a lot of people are burnt out. They're not trying Skeleton Crew, but I see so many polls online of people that even put out really anti stuff about Acolyte, and they're anti Disney, but a lot of them are pretty much on the board with this show. Everybody's liking it, and in the comments, I'm never going to check it out. I was like, no, check it out, give it a try.
Well, and that's kind of brings me to my question or next question, which is what metrics does Disney use to actually? I mean, how do they determine what's a good show? I mean, advertising certainly is a different world now than what it used to be in terms of buying a commercial spot. 2 minutes to get filled in commercial breaks. Now it's, I guess there's variance in terms of you can get the subscription service like I have without ads, or you can pay for ads. So is that how they're making determinations? Is it ratings? Is it both? Is it something else? I don't know what metrics they're using, because if it's blogs and YouTube views, that's not the way to do any kind of business, in my opinion.
That's why I say that when people complain that Acolyte was canceled because everybody was hating it online, I was like, no, no, go to the ratings. They went down every week. Viewership went down every week, and the finale was the lowest rated episode. So you can't.
So to your point though, where are the ratings? I mean, it's, in the old days it used to be Arbitron, or I mean there were actual.
They still use Nielsen. They're still using
Okay.
Nielsen as
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was the gauge, but it sounds like they're still using that old. Obviously, Nielsen's probably made some changes as far as how they conduct their polling, but
yeah.
I was just curious. I was
Yeah,
just
no,
curious.
they still use Nielsen. I've seen Nielsen out there. Obviously, like you said, it's not like what it once was. And unfortunately, we got to deal with a lot of what Disney or these companies report as streaming numbers. And
Well,
some
that's a good point too.
report them.
Well, yeah, yeah, it's a good point.
But anyways, anything last words you want to wrap up about this episode or anything?
Well, all I would say is there were some good opportunities for character development, which they pulled off. And after seeing this episode, I'm certainly anxious to see what takes place in the next episode, much less the last two.
Definitely, I agree with you. Last episode was probably my favorite. It's not like this episode took a step down. I thought it was pretty good, like you said, with the I like the KB. I like the interaction. So I'm loving this show. Can't wait for the end. It's one of those shows where I get upset when I see that end credit. Anyway,
Especially so soon.
yeah,
Especially so
especially
soon.
so soon. Gosh, I wish they'd make our episodes, but whatever. Anyways, all right, Darth Zartan, thank you for another week. We went a little long this week, but we went off on some tangents. I'll have to chop up the episode, but I will see you next week. But I'm sure I'll talk to you. I guess I'm going to see you Tuesday when you come by.
That's right. That's right. Good talking with you as always, and we'll see you soon.
All right. And for everybody else, just want to say thank you for joining me and Darth Zartan on another episode. I'm enjoying this show. I hope you are too. And we will be back next week. Until then, may the force be with you.